Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the ዄŷ Network where we reflect on ǀbağ's most trim work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're back to talk about Cutting Class. But before then, fan art contest.
Yes.
We are doing a fan art contest again. Yay, good times.
Yeah, it's that time.
It's that time of year, that special time, ཌү fan art contest time.
Yeah, and so our theme for this one, in keeping with the time, is the power of the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
As with the last one, you can submit basically anything to do with the ₦bağ work that isn't Twig.
Yep, no Twig allowed. Get out of here.
Twig coming to the ཌū repertoire soon. But for now, yeah, pretty much anything but. And yeah, the power of the holidays. So interpret that using parahumans or other verse as you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have about a month and a bit. The submissions will close right after the new year on the 4th of Jan, so you have time to get your fan art done, or, diorama, which was my personal favorite last time. But yeah, any kind of fan art is fine. How can people submit, Elliot?
So there'll be a post linked in this episode, which will, have all the details on prize money and, where to submit it and, a repetition of
and all that
due date.
Good stuff.
All the details.
Yeah, so check the link in the description for that. But for now, back to Cutting Class. Cutting Class 6.6 to be specific, which is in Verona's head. Verona and the trio finish their meals in the rain, having a bit of an awkward, tense silence because of all the recent shenanigans with Shelley. They step inside as tensions continue to simmer, and the Kennetiers decide, let's just go do homework.
Yeah, I love this because you can really feel how tense everything is getting, like, as they step inside. Maybe it's just me, but like I remember as a school kid, I fucking loved it when it rained because you got to go and like play inside, and it was just different. Whereas at this school, of course, right now, everyone having to go inside is just like compressing a kettle that's already at boiling point.
Yeah, it's clear that tensions are running very high in the school, and we'll see the kettle has started to boil over. Kettles don't really boil over, but you know what I mean. In the next chapter.
Yeah.
Although we don't actually see what's happening, frustratingly.
No, it's fantastic. I can't wait.
Yeah. But I really just wanted to tease us cruelly.
Well, because it's felt like this whole arc, it's felt like, okay, fucking any second now this
any
shit's
second
gonna blow.
Now it's gonna pop off. Yeah.
And then it's sort of like, yep, it started and you don't get to see it yet.
Yeah, the Kennetiers are not participating in it, so you don't get to see it.
Which is great.
That's cold, ₦bağ.
But to talk about the meal that's out in the rain, like as they sort of hurry to pack up as it starts raining, Avery offers Snowdrop some of her leftovers, and Snowdrop says no. So I guess,
oh my god,
R.I.P. my killer theory about how the brownies were pumping Snowdrop full of stuff for revenge or something.
The fact that happens so early in this chapter, I for a second thought that ₦bağ was intentionally doing this to deconfirm your theory, but then I realized that this chapter came out before we released our episodes, so that's probably not right.
No, he's like insightful enough that he knew idiots like me were going to start this theory, and he was already like, oh,
he put that in just to make you make a theory that he could then disprove. Yeah. That was pretty funny. I laughed out loud when I read that.
Although, if I might just pivot for a second, Verona's certainly eating a lot. Like it's brought up in her own head.
Brownie Revenge Part 2.
No, I don't think this is, because I definitely saw her lack of appetite as very tied into like her trauma around her dad and that sort of stuff. So part of me is like, it's really good that Verona is eating again and finding her appetite.
Yeah.
But then also it's like magically not magically enhanced, but like, really, really outrageously good brownie food. So like that. Like I think like the other side to that is me, so like it's maybe a bit of a Daniel situation where it's like she's finally eating again, but if it's all this food, and she's thought about it before, like how's she going to go back to eating frozen dinners with her dad? Like she's found a love of food again, and that's good. But if it's from this unrealistically good food, that's gonna have a bit of a throwback effect when she has to go back to real life.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything more dark that's going on here that we'll find out about as the chapters progress.
Yeah. I mean, I hope there's something about this food because it makes me so hungry every time I read it. So I hate the food because it sounds so delicious and torments me every time I read a chapter. So I want it to be
Mm.
bad because that means that it's not for nothing. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Um, I just something else that made me laugh in this bit of the chapter was just reading this interaction between Avery and Snowdrop, where Avery says, "I don't have the appetite. Want to finish this leftover for?" "Yeah," Snowdrop said. "Too bad," Avery said, and then she puts away her bowl. And just reading this, I was like, "Wait, what? Oh no, wait." Snowdrop said no, but I just thought it was funny that if you don't have the context, Avery seems like really cruel to Snowdrop in the scene. Like, "You want this? Yeah, yeah. Well, tough."
I
I just
mean,
thought that was funny.
I read it like once I realized it was Snowdrop. Like I read it as a bit of a too bad. But
Yeah.
I agree
No,
that
yeah.
like before you process it's a Snowdropism, like you do kind of read it as too bad.
Avery, what are you doing? Yeah, I thought that was very funny.
Yep.
Anywho.
So just the last thing before we sort of talk about, the Kennedys sort of being locked in their room doing homework. Wait, there's a moment where Durachet walks past and she just has so much presence and is keeping things calm, and I just can't wait to see her in action next chapter.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when we find
Where
out
do you
what's
think she's going to side? With Alexander, presumably, right?
that seems to be the impression we've been under, that like her and Ray are Team Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the other thing here is like, like the Kennedys sort of see all this tension and they're like, let's just fuck off to our room. And obviously that relates to where things end at the end of the next chapter. Like we'll talk about that. But it's interesting how wrong that feels to Verona. Like Verona takes some time to be like, it feels like I'm going to bed at 6 o'clock, because it's like, there's
Mm.
actually stuff she wants to do, but she's having to be locked in her room. Whereas, when she goes home, she just fucking sits in her room because she doesn't want to go outside. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like, I want to read a bit into Verona on this, and that, like, she doesn't want to close herself off, and that's a good thing. But yeah, maybe we should talk about it when the three completely shut themselves off for the weekend, because I feel like that's a bigger version of this.
Yeah, true. You're right. You hear it in this chapter because we're in Verona's head, but we don't really notice Lucy being like, "Oh, Verona seems like she's unhappy being cooped up," or anything. Maybe it is because they're doing a ritual, and that's kind of Verona's whole vibe.
Yeah, it's just interesting that like Verona notices how tense things are, but she still doesn't really want to lock herself up for the night.
Mm.
Yeah, like I think she wants to be out there and making friends and being human, and that's good. And it's a shame that this place just sucks so much ass that she can't do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yep. So yeah, the trio are hanging out, and they discuss the idea of Alcazaring into Avery's photo.
Yeah. I don't know if we say this too much or not enough. I feel like both are true, but I just
Mm.
love the vibe that this group of four have. Like, they're here and they're talking about really serious stuff, but it's intermingled with like, fun, friendly, like fucking around, like joking with each other. Like, there's this bit where they're all taking turns convincing Snowdrop to bite each other, and then it turns on Lucy in this really funny moment. Like, I just love seeing them all be friends and just, having that push through all the serious business as well, even in these more
Mm.
casual settings.
Mm. Yeah, it's fun. They just have a fun vibe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like pleasant would almost be the way
Yeah.
I would describe this particular scene, because it's just, even when they're discussing more serious stuff, it's just so nice.
Yeah, there's obviously Snowdrop running around biting them. My favorite part was Snowdrop is attacking Verona, and Avery says, "Well, obviously, I'm going to have Alpi as my familiar, so Verona will have a domain." Verona tries to protest, but is dealing with Snowdrop, so can't. And then we get the line, "Verona, unable to speak, settled for a gesture using her free hand," which I just think is a great example of Wildbow making a nice joke by leaving things unsaid. Works perfectly.
Yeah,
Um,
this book
it's
does so
classic.
much of that. That's great as well, because she's giving Avery the old Snowdrop thumbs up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I
Exactly.
I also I want to talk about the actual sort of conversation they start to have here, which is like, well, first off, they start trying to like look at Alcazaring in the books, and Lucy kind of goes off on this rant about how these books are so like obtuse. Um,
Mm.
and they sort of notice that like what these books often do is bury the useful information in the back, and it gets compared to recipes online. And like, because this is a pet hate of mine as well. I fucking hate how when you get to an online recipe, you have to scroll through the person's life story to get to the list of ingredients.
Yep. Which has that comment been made in universe? Was that?
Yeah.
That's just such a great analogy.
Well, it's interesting though because it serves a point in the practice. Like the three kind of agree that it's like you're making a choice by having to skip that info, so it sits a bit more on your head if you like rush into things like the familiar ritual.
Mm,
So there's a bit of a like, small statement being made by saying, "Hey, this is stuff you need to consider first before doing the ritual."
yes, I agree. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I still find it frustrating, I guess.
I think there's another thing they sort of quickly touch on and don't bring up again, which is that like the really, really juicy info is left out of the books. And they
Mm,
briefly, and I think we talked about that during one of the extra materials recently as well. Like how it seems like, sometimes it feels like this is all just advertising rather than a textbook.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. It's a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
No. Can we call out? I think calling out something that's I enjoyed seeing, which was when Verona says that turning into an other is not the primary plan anymore.
Yeah.
I greatly enjoyed that. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of knew that, but it's good to have it confirmed.
Yeah, I think so much of Arc 5 really felt like it was tackling that idea for Verona.
Yes.
And so I think we sort of ended that arc with the others confronting her, and this is sort of our delivery on that idea, especially because I think, this is really shaping up to be an arc that's largely dealing with some of Lucy's arc. Um,
Mm.
and so just like a little confirmation that Verona is in a much better place after, being kind of a thematic focus of Arc 5. Now we've got Lucy kind of coming to the fore a bit in Arc 6, and it's just like, yeah, so Verona's doing a lot better now.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's nice that kind of you expect that that's building up in last arc 5 stuff is building up to the confrontation around Verona turning into another. And it kind of was, but it wasn't a confrontation, right? That was clearly not the right word for what we got. It was more of a realignment and reassurance, which is just such a nice way that this trio solves problems between the three of them. It's so nice. I love it. I love having a trio that are so aligned and kind to each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like we sort of talked about in Arc 5. Like, they didn't defeat the people Bristow sent at them as much as just
Yeah.
convince them to be better people. And, like, that's what I've loved is that usually their solution to conflict has amounted to just making the other person stop being a dick.
Well, they did defeat Sharon. They aligned with Daniel and Clem, but Sharon was fully defeated, which is great.
I mean, they just gave her a minor concussion and did a bit of a kidnapping. It wasn't that bad.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, some people too far got, and I feel like that's what's going to be interesting about where this Bristow and Alexander stuff ends up for me. Is like Bristow at least is starting to feel to me like I don't know if you can convince him to stop being a dick. Like he's too entrenched in this pattern of being an asshole.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we see a bit of that in the next chapter with Lucy when she has the first proper interaction that people have had with Bristow face to face. I think we had the Verona phone call, but this feels like an extension.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the next phase of it. So
Yeah.
that's what's going to be interesting to me is like you it is better if you can go out into the world and convince people to change for the better, but you are going to encounter people who are just not fixable sometimes, at least for you, and it's well, what do you do then?
Yeah.
So, what do you think of their ideas of how they can tie each other into all the rituals? Like I think they sort of talk about being ministers at the wedding for the familiar or trying to tie a familiar to all of them as a trio. The domain one seems a bit fuzzier. They're like, oh, I don't know, we'll give like special rent agreements or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's the domain one as well that always stumps me, right? I don't see how they can have a domain that belongs to one of them and kind of infuse it. I had this thought maybe they could do like a domain that all three of them own together collectively, like a clubhouse, or like, I mean, we get a hint towards the house that Matthew and Edith might buy for them, and maybe that's what that would be. Like they each own a room, and the rooms partially bleed into each other or something. I actually don't know what it could be other than that. I just have no idea.
Yeah, I'm trying to tie like domains to the idea of property ownership, and I mean, you can buy a property together, but yeah, what does it look like? Like, yeah, like are they roomies, and what does that mean? Like, do they have shared space but each their own corner?
Yeah, I don't know. I again, yeah, the domain. I just feel like I can't reconcile how it's going to be all three of them together.
I suppose we need to know more about the specifics of the ritual. Like that's what we didn't get in our textbook excerpts from the extra materials, right? Like because like with the implement ritual, what we sort of learned here is it's like, oh well, we can build the implement out of Verona and Avery things to tie them into it. So it's kind of like, how do you incorporate the others in the domain ritual? Like, what do you do to build the domain? And it's like, okay, how can we incorporate the other two into that process?
Mm,
So, like with the familiar one, it's like if Avery is taking the familiar as the primary and the other two are sort of the backups, is it like, the others just chime in, like they said, as kind of ministers, like quickly just adding a few lines of their own? Yeah, I don't know. I liked the idea of just tying a familiar to the power bank the three of them share because
yeah.
I just like that conceptually as like eschewing that kind of ownershipy vibe of the whole thing and sort of saying here, like, we have this power well that is given to us by others and we're going to let you in as an equal member.
Yeah, if they take a familiar that's from Kennet as well, maybe that would be enough to like tie it to each of them to an extent. I don't
Yeah,
know.
true. I mean, because yeah, like we'll talk about the concept of bringing in new members and not giving them full rights when we get to Matthew and Edith's phone call later. But like that it would feel a bit weird to me if they weren't sort of offering someone the same kind of access to the power well as they have. Depends on the person and the situation, I guess.
Yeah, indeed.
I also want to call out. There's a little weird bit where Verona just spends a while watching Reed Mussa's two familiars out in the rain. Because both of them have come up a number of times, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, we're like, it feels like we're sort of warming up to bring them into the story. So I guess keep an eye out for them.
I mean, yeah, it's weird. You're right. Like, it's weird that there's just this bit where Snowdrop sees them and Verona checks it out, and we just basically see them standing in the rain, which is very weird. It's very strange, and it's hard to think this isn't something that will, like, keeping them in our mind for an important conflict that's coming up or something like that.
Well, Blackhorn was mentioned in last week's chapters as one of the people who met up with Bristow. And they sort of figured out that the Mussas are probably on Bristow's side because Mussa was a founder who doesn't seem to be with the school anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe like obviously because I think I said the same thing last week about the Henniger family, and then obviously one of the Hennigers comes to the fore this week. So it's maybe just Walbo's slowly introducing us to the players on Bristow's side because we're quite familiar with most of Alexander's.
Yeah, I suspect you're right that it'll be to do with Bristow. I mean, I can't think what it would be other than just they're being put in our memory so that we'll remember them when they come into a conflict in 2 chapters' time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, armed with a set of questions about Alcazaring and not really knowing who to turn to at the school, the Kennetys decide to call Matthew and Edith to answer some questions.
So I love how the first attempts at this call fail, and they're like worried it's saboteurs, and then this moment where they're like, "Oh, who's watching?" And then Verona kind of realizes that it's just because they've built a connection blocker around themselves. So it's like Matthew and Edith can't really answer because the spirits are the ones blocking it because of their own thing. That definitely felt like a bit of a statement on unintended consequences of all of this sort of practitioner-y stuff. Maybe you could read into it as a warning about Matthew and Edith because it's like, oh, we built this thing to stop enemies listening in. Oh, Matthew and
I
Edith
don't know
can't
about
listen in.
that.
No, it's just like I lean more towards this idea of they've built this thing to keep their enemies from watching, but by closing themselves off from their enemies, they've also closed themselves off from their allies.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a bit of a like, hey, maybe you guys are being your own worst enemies to an extent kind of vibe. I I love the read that the practice knows they're secretly enemies and so is impacting their communication, but I don't think it's right.
No, I guess to jump ahead in my notes as to my theories around what's going to happen in the 3 days they're stuck in this room, is this could be foreshadowing, like maybe Kenneth is going to be involved in the 3 days that they're closed off and they can't do anything. Because Bristow isn't sworn to stay out of Kenneth for those 3 days, and now he knows the practitioners are going to be in a room for 3 days.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Also, I love how Edith is in a funk because it's raining. Like, I know it's more than that, but it's just like the second Edith was on the other end of the phone and we found out it was raining over there too, I was like, oh no, poor Edith. She must hate the rain.
I mean, yes, it's a bit more complex than that, but I did like that. I mean, this Edith being in a funk thing, again, I know she's pretty much suspect numero uno, but I really hope she's not responsible. I'm really starting to dig Edith a lot. Like, she's just so, maybe this is the wrong word, but human?
Yeah, I mean, the thing's going to be, if it is her, and it seems kind of likely that it is at this point, given the way the world has treated her and like her existence, I feel like it's going to be pretty easy to create a situation where I'm very sympathetic to her motives. I don't know. We'll see. I need to go back and read what Miss was saying at the end of 5.d about how this relates to setting precedent or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's to me, it's going to come down to the why, like what Edith's master plan is, and that's something I could see myself understanding, even if I don't agree with it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Right. I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll. I'm sure it will be something empathizable. Is that a word?
Yeah, I mean, it is just so funny that it's like we have this incredibly positive interaction with Matthew and Edith right here, and then we just get a reminder at the end of this chapter that yeah, it was probably Edith though. It's
yes,
it's such
which
a
is
roller coaster of
sad.
emotions.
Oh, I hope it's not, but it probably almost certainly was. So we find out about this about Tashlit. We have a name for her now, Verona's BFF. And do you want to take us through her backstory here, Elliot?
It's so wild. So, okay, her lineage is a cursed princess who was like very much done like bad by her dad. Was cursed to like basically give birth to or cast off others every time anything fucking happened to her. One of the others she cast off was a giant sea monster. That sea monster had its mind swapped with some noble lady. That noble lady entered some sort of Sleeping Beauty situation, got basically attacked by some other, like, enterprising laborer, I think is the term.
Sexually assaulted.
Yes.
Right, is the read I got from it.
Yeah, very much. And then Tashlit was born of an egg from that, union's not the right word because that's not what it was, that crime.
Yes.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's a backstory for sure. There's so many. It's like such a long chain of terrible, terrible events.
I kept thinking Matthew was at the end of it. I kept thinking, oh, okay, and so that's Tashlit.
Yeah.
I was like, no.
So that's who it is. Yeah.
He's like, oh, she's the cursed princess. No. Oh, okay, so she's this sea monster or something? No. Yeah, okay, no. So she.
Yeah, I'm. It's a real It's a real series of unfortunate events, isn't it? And that has led to Tashlit, which I don't know. Is that going to mean that she's probably not as cool as we thought she might be initially? We'll find out, I guess.
Didn't she, when Verona asked if she was like an evil other who eats babies, didn't she give Verona the kind of so-so gesture?
Yeah.
So,
which, again, is an endearing response to that question.
It's a very endearing way of saying, yeah, I'm kind of a monster.
I mean, yeah, kind of, yeah. I mean, she's saying, I mean, yeah, but who are we to judge, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I took from it, at least.
I actually tried to look up Tashlit's name to see if that was a clue. And I ended up finding there's a Hebrew word for it's called like Tashlik. I'm probably there's probably a better way to pronounce that. I apologize. But it's the Hebrew word meaning like to cast off or to like throw away. And it's also the name of a ritual that is performed during like the Jewish New Year, where you sort of metaphorically cast your sins into the ocean.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like a pretty good name for Tashlet. I can't help but think that this is a word Alpi, got from her memories and decided was her name. maybe this is a bit of a snowdrop situation. That's not quite her name, but it'll do.
Yeah, true.
I don't know. As someone who is the kind of unwanted child of something that was cast off of a cursed princess, like that name seems fairly symbolic.
Yeah, no, I think it works. I think there was a post on the subreddit this morning that dived into it in a bit more detail as well and found a few more links. So I really quite like this vibe.
I got to
but again,
resub to the subreddit. I keep missing so much stuff.
Yeah, to confirm that you came up with this by yourself, you didn't just steal it from from the subreddit, did you? Huh?
No, my
I'm
bad.
on to you.
I mean, that's probably not the first time that's happened. I need to be in the sub so I can see when people think of stuff before me and give them credit. So also, I think the other thing that comes up is there's a part where Verona and admittedly myself are like, oh wow, so Tashlet's really old, and Matthew's like, no, she's only 17. This stuff with
Yeah.
like a practitioner
Yikes.
finding the mind swapped sea serpent woman in a coma or whatever. That only happened a couple of years ago. It's just like, I like this as a way of reminding us. It's like, no, this world's still pretty fucked up.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. I think this was a bit of a trick by Ɂbağ, because the fact that the word kingdom is used so much made me think that it was like medieval vibe. But no, it's not. It's more modern than that. So I think ₦bağ set us up for a little bit of a gotcha there, but that's fine. It can happen.
Well, I think like the kingdom stuff is mostly in relation to where like the sea serpent's from, and the sea serpent is very old. It's only the part where like I think Tashlet specifically, it's words like I think they compare it to Sleeping Beauty, and they're still talking about a sea serpent that can swallow ships. And so it's like that still gives you the impression that we're talking like Middle Ages, not
Yes, for sure,
not 21st century.
Yeah.
I agree.
But no,
I think it was an intentional trick to just sort of, and I think it's designed to make us think, oh shit, like, this stuff happens here too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's intentionally tricking us a bit, but that's fine. It's a nice little gotcha that gotched me at least.
Yeah, same. And so yeah, it's interesting, like, because I had my whole like the can it others loosely correspond to marginalized groups theory, and I was trying to figure out if Tashlet fit into that, but her backstory is too wild and has too many variables for me to like feel confident.
Yeah, run the numbers, and it's hard to figure out what it is, right? It could be a few things.
I think like what the craziest part of it to me is that she actually grew up like thinking she was human, despite having hatched out of an egg. But they sort of say, it wasn't until puberty or something that she, turned into another. And I feel like that's probably going to be the important part for this. But just like, regardless, like that's so crazy. Like, imagine just thinking you were a person and then like finding out that, you're from this fucking wild lineage and you're not who you thought you were. You suddenly don't fit in the society you'd presumably been brought up in. Like, it would suck.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, they say Tashlet's taking it pretty well, so I mean, good on her, I guess.
Yeah.
Because like, fuck, that would mess me up.
Yep. Yeah, pretty rough. It's like the worst version of Harry Potter ever. On your 12th birthday, you find out that you're some horrible monster accidentally, and your flesh starts sloughing off.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But anyway, so back to the rest of the phone call. We can't just talk about Tashlet forever, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Edith confirms that there are 10 new others in Kennet, but they only get a single vote. And
collectively. Similar to the goblins.
Yeah, well, and they're expected to obey the current others.
Yeah, which means, do they get a vote? Doesn't that just mean they have to vote how they're told?
I mean, depends on the phrasing of it all, I suppose.
Fair enough.
Like, maybe
it'd be weird to give them a vote and say, but you have to vote with me.
It's weird because I thought the goblins kind of had some more of their own votes, but that's the whole thing. But it's just, this is so like, I don't like this as a thing.
Yeah.
I know there was a bit of pushback when I a couple of arcs ago suggested that like it was weird that Kenneth didn't give the pig dog guy a chance. And I feel like what I was bringing up there as a general rule is kind of like, where is the line for Kenneth and why? And I feel very confident in saying, like, looking at this, that they're getting 10 new others. Some of them we really like Tashlit, and they all get 1 vote. Like that's saying to me that their line has moved and in a direction I don't think is good.
Yeah, I mean it's setting them up as like second-class citizens for the new others. I guess the charitable read is like they're on probation. They're kind of like these 10 are the trial group, and whichever ones are like accepted after a few months will become full voting members or whatever. But
Edith
I mean
doesn't
that's
tell us.
assuming a lot. Yeah, exactly.
If that's
we
the
don't
case,
hear any rumblings of that.
Yeah, if that's the case, I can actually kind of get behind that.
Yeah, but Edith doesn't explain it like that, right?
No.
So she's not saying, "Oh, they're new members, so they'll for their probation period they'll collectively vote as one or something."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that would be a lot more palatable to me. There's still room in there to maybe have a discussion, but like I could live with that being the system. But there's no indication that that's the case, and I just can't help but think like, wait. Miss was tending this garden so carefully, and Matthew and Edith are trying, but they do seem to consistently be bungling it. And to me,
I think they're doing their best. I just think it's a very hard thing to do. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to hold it against them.
Yeah, you're right. That probably came off more judgy than I intended it, but it's just like, yeah, because I feel like I judge the Blue Heron Institute a lot for how shitty its interpretation of like community is. So credit where credit's due. Kenneth's not doing so hot at the moment either, I suppose. Without someone like Miss, tending the garden so carefully.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll get. Presumably, we're going to get back to Kenneth soon, and we'll see how all these, how all these choices are impacting the town.
Yeah, 6.8 is just going to be like, oh, the school burnt down while you're in there. It's all gone to shit. Go home.
Yep. Yep. So, in this phone call, Matthew continues. He goes on to then give advice about Alcazar's and offers to help with a domain.
Holy shit! Like,
yeah, generous.
Yeah, I mean, offering to buy this land, especially given like how much they've told us, like their life and financial situation is rough. Like, I was just like, wow. The very skeptical part of me is like, does them buying it for them give them some sort of power over it? But I don't think so. I think I want to believe in this, especially because it would be such a thing. The Kenneteers were kind of against them in Arc 4 and Arc 3. So to have turned them around to this degree, like I want that to be true. It's just there's all this Edith stuff from the end of the chapter sitting here.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to process it. Like, it's clearly so nice and generous. And the reason they give of kind of tying the Kenneteers more to Kenneth is enough of one to make me feel like, yeah, that could be legit, right? But I just hope they're not evil.
Yeah. Well, because that's that turning point for me, right? Is they both sort of say connecting you three to Kenneth is a good thing.
Yeah.
And like that's huge.
Like, yeah,
that was
solid.
That was the thing in Arc 3 is they're like, we don't know if we can trust you. So it'd be like, on the one hand, I'm so elated that they've turned it around and they're like, yeah, we trust you so much. We want you to have a domain here and to connect you to this place. And then the other part of me is like, this is the roller coaster ride Walbo wanted us on, because then at the end he reminds us, hey, but Edith probably done it.
Yep.
It's
yeah. I think I'm gonna just say it. Edith's not guilty. I'm calling it now. Not guilty for Edith. The verdict has been passed. Regardless, I reserve the right to retract that later. But for now, let's just say not guilty on Edith.
Okay, I'm actually pretty convinced she is guilty, and I'm just gonna think that what I know her plan, I'm gonna kind of support it. Well, we'll see. I mean,
Edith did nothing wrong. You heard it here. We're just gonna call it.
I mean, I feel like the point, like, or the fact that the Carmine Beast was murdered isn't going to end up mattering by the time we learn why. Like, it sort of fits into this whole stuff Miss was talking about this being an important precedent. Like, it's going to be. Do you remember when we found out the Hungry Choir were the ones who killed it, but by that point it didn't matter because they were just the murder weapon? I feel like we're going to have that again. like we're going to find out Edith killed it for this, but by that point, we're not even going to really care about that anymore because there'll be some bigger picture, and that's just a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. That's kind of what we've been calling for a while, so I think that's almost certainly right.
I hope so, because I think Edith done it, and I don't want to hate her for it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Also, like one of my last things on this phone call is Matthew has a few moments that felt a bit like is there a word for like when someone puts their foot in their mouth in a bit of a like because they're just a bit ignorant and stupid sort of way?
I mean, just putting their foot in their mouth, I think is the word for it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's what Matthew does. Like he just has a few moments where I was like, if we sort of use this metaphor for practitioners or people with privilege in this world, like there were a few moments where I started to feel like Matthew was an ex-practitioner. Like the way he keeps trying to take Edith fishing and he's like, she doesn't even come out on the boat. And it's like, well,
yeah, she's fire. So
she's
water.
She's
I don't
a
know,
fire
Matthew.
spirit.
If you've never played Pokemon, water's super effective against her. So you need to chill out.
Sit in a wooden boat. Like,
yeah, true.
Like,
another good point.
Like, I was just like, Matt, like, I'm sorry, Matt, but like, read the room. Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm maybe I'm just getting this vibe because we saw in 5.D that he did some practice, but like, I just, there, I couldn't help but notice there were just a few bits where I was like, Matthew, I think you're, putting your foot in your mouth.
Yeah, chillax, Matthew. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea that because he's an ex-practitioner, he's kind of he's got the thing of practitioner. He's got a bit of practitioner tendencies to just be a bit shit sometimes.
Yeah, well, because like the other big example was sort of when they're talking about like having learned binding and stuff. Matthew's like, yeah, I don't really think there's anything wrong with binding like the stupid or smaller others. Like, but some people here disagree, but I don't have a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think I've made my feelings on this clear before. Like that's something where I'm like, I don't know. I want to get a very clear message from someone on where they're drawing their line before I think stuff like that is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially
I think,
like as a dude who grew Edith from a really simple set of spirits, it seems like a weird thing to say, right?
Yes, it does. It is. It's just that same weird kind of manipulative vibe that has always been simmering under the surface with Matthew, that especially Avery has seemed to pick up on.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of been explainable away as like, oh, it's because Edith isn't in her element in the town, but like, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I want so much to believe in Matthew and Edith that I'm trying desperately to assuage all those fears.
Yeah.
Actually, and speaking of, there is a moment where Verona sort of is like, oh yeah, what I've noticed is that others don't seem to have human lifespans. They're either very long or very, very short. And then Avery's like, can I have my opossum to hug? And I was like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. Everyone who's listening, we're all just going to like mentally tell the spirits that Snowdrop is in like the very, very long, possibly immortal camp. And if we all believe it, then that'll make the spirits do it, right?
Yeah, we've talked about the idea that the audience of Wildbow's works is analogous to the spirits in universe. So if we agree that Snowdrop is immortal, then it will become true.
Yeah. And this leads me right back to the Carmine Snowdrop theory. Positive.
That's endgame. Carmine Snowdrop is endgame for sure. Okay, so next up, Avery hassles Snowdrop for a update.
Sorry,
and
Snowdrop?
Sheridan for an update on how it went talking to her dad, and gets one.
Yeah, we can't afford to get Sheridan's name wrong again. Okay, so it sounds like, based on all this, like Avery's mum is going to be cool. Like my favorite thing about this is Avery's mum basically starts threatening Sheridan. As soon as like Sheridan brings this up, she's like, "You better not make this a thing because like I'll be super disappointed in you." It's like the irony is that Sheridan is actually being really fucking cool about it right now. So yeah, Avery's mum, good. And Avery's dad is the real puzzler. And there's a lot of the text dedicated to all three of them kind of trying to pass this out. I'm wondering where you've landed.
I think Verona comes up with a pretty good theory. I think it's too early to know, right? And Avery shouldn't go crazy worrying about it until she has more information. Verona does well to keep the ball in the air, though. Like, it could be that her dad is a bit shit and kind of realizes it, and that would be probably the worst case scenario at this point, right? Is a bit shit, realizes that he's being a bit shit, and kind of gets a talking to from Avery's mother later that night. Or it's just that he's kind of awkward and doesn't really know how to react, was kind of expecting to have a conversation with Avery and hasn't had the chance yet. Like, I think that's possible.
Yeah, because remember how desperate he was to drive her to the school in Arc 4?
Yeah.
And she had to do magical shit to make him stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. Like, especially, knowing like Rowan, I could definitely see the dad just sort of doing like the sort of Rowan-esque, like ignorant privilegey move of just like joking about it. And then when Avery's mum is like, "Oh, this is serious," him being like, "Oh shit, it probably is," and then straightening up. But just like, so not being against it at all, just being an idiot, which is better, I think, because the intention is good once he realizes that it's serious.
Yeah. I think still we can't pull an Avery and like, read so much into a situation we really just don't have enough information on.
Yeah, that's true. I'm very curious to see where it goes, because I really like all the stuff Avery was saying about, like, even if he is cool, but it's just because people like my mum are pressuring him into it. Like, that's really shitty. Like, she cares so much about what he actually thinks, and I like agree. But then also at the same time, it's like, I don't know, like, it's better than him being open. I don't know. It's such a mess of a situation. I can't imagine having to go through this.
Yeah, for sure.
It's stressing me out, and it's like a fictional person going through it. I can't imagine going through it myself.
Yeah, I like, it's rough. I just think Avery is just too deep in her own head, and she needs to try not to dive so far after it. But I know that's an impossible task.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done.
Exactly.
That said, she does kind of pivot from this conversation to just like, fuck it, let's go do the Alcazar. And I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but at least to me, I was very worried. Like, after our other story on an Alcazar, that was like, oh, there were bad memories associated.
It went so bad
with the item, and it went bad. And I'm kind of like, didn't we have a whole thing where we had to relive that night in the ruins with Avery, and it was a fucking nightmare? And I was like, this is the photo that you want to, like, are you sure? And then, Avery's sort of like, oh, it's okay, I've been tempering it with myself all day. And I was like, Avery, you've had a fucking dreadful day. Like, I don't. So,
yikes.
I mean, it all works out, but I was very, very worried going in.
Yeah, fair.
And what I really love about this, though, is like the reason I had a shred of hope for it was because when Avery's first like, okay, let's just drop this and do it, we sort of get a great character moment for all three, because Lucy's kind of like, are we really just like dropping it like that? Because of course Lucy wouldn't just drop it. And I think she even makes a joke about how hypocritical of her it would be to suggest you do that. But she also kind of shares my concerns about whether we're in the right headspace to be doing this. Meanwhile, Verona is just sort of like, yep, cool, next thing. Like, it's just very Verona to just immediately move on and pivot. But Avery actually does explain, like, she isn't doing what I feel like Verona would be doing, which is just trying to bury her feelings and run away. For Avery, it's like she feels good if she's trying to make the world better, and that's, this is something she can do to do that. Like, rather than stewing, she wants to be helping, and this is a different problem, but it's helping someone. And I mean, I just love that idea from Avery of just, I don't need to fix the world, but if I can tell myself I tried, that will be good enough. I love that idea.
Yeah. No, it definitely resonates. I like it. It's just, it vibes with me as well, with just all three of them. They're so good-hearted, just kind of needing to know that they're doing all they can to improve the world in whatever way they see fit, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm loving how we're seeing, because all three of them have different ways of handling stuff. Like, Lucy wouldn't drop it, and that's why she challenges this idea. Verona would drop it, and that's why she challenges Lucy challenging the idea. And Avery kind of explains why she's doing it here, and it's like, in a story that's talking about how we work together, I think it's really telling that we've got three protagonists who deal with things in different ways. It's kind of like it's about learning to work with people who work differently to you.
Mm, mm,
It takes me right back to that conversation in like 2.1. I think it
mm,
was where like Lucy. It was right after the Hungry Choir, and Lucy tries to tell Avery to not be mad and beat herself up, and Avery's like, "I don't want to turn into you." And stuff, and I I feel like that was one of our first instances of this story, sort of saying like we don't all have to be the same to work together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they're unique enough as characters, but they're just a great team, right? And that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah,
Um,
they're so good.
they're great. They're great. Speaking of the Kenneteers, they recruit Zed to help out with the Alcazar, basically defending them while they do it, and step in to the night of the murder.
I can't believe it didn't occur to me until we went into the photo that this was the night of the murder. Like it was just one of those moments where, as soon as the text was like Kennett Arena, I was like, "Oh fuck yeah, this is the night the Carmine Beast died. There's got to be a clue in here." Um,
Mm.
so it's like on top of all of the coolness that was this ritual, because this ritual just in and of itself is fucking fantastic. I was just like, "Oh my god, yes!" Like clues for the murder. It was so exciting.
Mm. Yeah. I also didn't realize until we get into it, and I'm like, oh shit! Like, of course we're gonna get murder clues. I was also hoping for a bit of Louise Bayer, but unfortunately, she does not make an appearance, which is sad.
No, she was not important enough to leave an imprint on this.
Ouch.
No, but like speaking of how the Kenneteers make everything better, I love how they cheer Zed up by recruiting him here. Like it's like, oh, Zed was in a funk, and then they ask him for help.
Yes.
So it's like
Yes.
you cheer someone up by getting them to help you. Like that's the most wholesome
Yep.
shit ever.
Good on him.
And then like just to jump back to the ritual, like first of all, I love that it was a photo that we did this with because I think just conceptually that was so much easier for us to get because you're sort of taking a thing and making it a space. And like if you were to do that with like a water bottle, like that might be harder for us to understand. Whereas like with a photo, it's like this feels like easy mode for an
For what
Alcazar
an Alcazar should
because it's
be,
like
yeah, because it is just
it's a tableau of the scene.
turns
Like,
it into a diorama.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get to really play with like all of the like meaningful impressions that were left on this. Like like we get to walk around and hear what people are thinking, and like that's really cool. And it's like I almost think we might get to see another one of these sometime, just because then we can start to get real weird with it. And it's like, well, let's Alcazar like like a water bottle and see what that does.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if we'll get another Alcazar in this story. It's hard to think of what opportunity we might get for that, but I mean, it'd be cool to see.
I mean, you could Alcazar into Bree to get to Yolda to get some clues.
Yeah, true.
I mean, there's probably a million things you could do it to. Whether they do, I guess we'll see. But yeah.
Yes, I will see, I guess. Just quickly as well to note, Lucy and Verona in the stands cheering for Avery even before they're awakened as a trio. Love it. Such a supportive trio. I'm so on the Kenneteers train at the moment,
Yeah, I especially love this because I guess my read on Lucy and Verona is that they weren't super social before, well, they were, or even after necessarily, but like they were a pair and they didn't interact with people outside of each other much. It was kind of the vibe I got. So I was surprised to see them at like a school event like this. I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting. I never went to my school's sports matches, at least. So yeah, like it is kind of heartwarming that the two of them were just good enough people to go and support their their classmates.
Yeah, they're just great. They're just champions,
Yeah. And as a side note, like to jump ahead a bit to what the implement is, how perfect is this scene? Because they're walking around eavesdropping on what people were thinking at the time of the photo. Like it's just, we'll get into this in the next chapter, but like this is one of those things where on the reread I'm like, oh, this is so perfect for the implement. They're walking around eavesdropping on stuff.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, yeah. The eavesdrop earring, like, fuck, we'll get to this at the end of the chapter, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just so good. Yeah, let's move on so we can discuss how great it is. So, with the help of Snowdrop, the Kennedys notice that the miss in the photo isn't looking at them. She's looking out into the parking lot where the Carmine Beast died, to where Edith and the Hungry Choir are standing.
I mean, yeah, we already touched on this, but like getting this reminder that ever since we had the whole coin thing, we've kind of known Edith is a big suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And this just like really piling onto that. After the phone call, I was just like, oh, why are you doing this to me?
Yep. We called it. Edith did nothing wrong, so I'm sure this is nothing. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. We should just move on.
Okay. I suppose I had one question. Sorry, there was one part here that I was confused about. So they've got like these little tools where they can take like snapshots of stuff and or like wrap it up and take it out with. And Lucy grabs a snapshot of Edith in the photo.
Yeah.
And she says it's not just like to use as evidence, but it's to do with the implement.
Yes.
Is this where they get, because the implement has like fiery, smoky stuff associated with it? Is that where this, or is this where that came from?
Oh, no. I think this is just the part that gives it a bit more eavesdrop vibe. The thing of like trying to sneak in on missed conversations. I think the smoky stuff, I'm not sure where that comes from. Somewhere else, I guess.
Well, just because Edith's eyes are glowing, like with her signature, like flame.
Yeah,
deal.
True.
And because I think the earring, the main gemstone in it is like a fiery sort of gemstone. And considering the other ones they got were like ice, I was like, I thought that was weird. I was just wondering if there's a bit of an Edith flair to these earrings and if that means anything.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm connecting a lot of dots to get there, I'll admit. So maybe I'm just wrong.
I mean, it could be. I want to raise the idea that like the photo, we get a bit of information about why, Avery, I think it's Avery, raises the question, why can we see Edith and the Hungry Choir when obviously they're not in the photo? And the answer is kind of like stone tape, psychic impression type stuff. But I also worry that it's possible they're just like it's being taken from them or from Avery, and it's kind of just them seeing what they expect to see a bit. Like maybe this isn't the, smoking gun that it feels like it is.
It doesn't feel like it would be admissible in court to some extent, because you're right. There's like a few degrees of separation before you get to the image of Edith. So yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to trust it because such a big deal is made out of it. Like maybe this is a bit of a doylistic approach, but I was like,
sure,
I do.
It would be weird for it to be like removed as evidence later.
Yeah, I do trust it. It's just we need to know more about what it means. For me, all this Edith stuff just comes back to getting more from her on why.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I guess we will find out once Edith is ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing.
Sure.
So yes, having secured what they need, the Kennedys go back to Zed and begin their work to fashion the photo into a gem to be part of Lucy's implement, an earring.
I was so mad when I read that it was an earring because the second I read it, I was like, oh, it's fuck. Like,
it's just perfect.
Obviously Ɂbağ invented this system, but it's still amazing how incredibly fucking good he is at it. Like, again, maybe I missed it because I do feel quite segregated from the community as a whole, but I didn't see anybody guess anything like this. So please, prove me wrong if you did.
If someone called it, let us know. Post a link because I'm keen to see that comment. But I didn't see anyone call it either.
In retrospect, we should have made it a Pale Predictor thing that went for a week.
True.
But yeah, it's just sorry. When you see this, I was just like, ₦bağ's basically been shoving this in our face for the whole arc. Like clues for this, there's just a list of them once you realize it. Like we had a whole conversation last week about her trying to eavesdrop on Corbin's conversation. Just as one example of just like this, in retrospect, it's so fucking obvious.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Like the eavesdrop earrings, it just is so perfect for Lucy in so many ways. I'm, again, just floored by how well ₦bağ can define characters, let us know exactly who these characters are, and then impress us by how little we actually were able to predict where he was going.
Well, it's like, he just still manages to absolutely stomp us with his understanding of the characters and ideas for what fits them.
Yep, every time.
I mean, it's not just a great fit for Lucy. There's like just because if you look at sort of the wider story, like augurs are a big part of this story, and their symbol is an eye.
Yeah.
And obviously now, like Lucy's sort of being symbolically tied to the concept of ears, and I think that there's like a subtle but important difference between like spying on someone with an eye versus like overhearing them, because it's like if someone's spying on you, they're kind of looking at you regardless of what you're doing. Whereas like Lucy's only listening to the shit you choose to say, right? Like so not.
Yeah, you're right. She's not what's the fucking word for it? Like listening to something outside of her immediate surroundings. She's just listening to things that people are saying around her slightly better.
Yeah, she's not like 1984ing this situation. She's just like keeping a closer look, or no, look's not the right word because I'm just talking about how she's not eyes, but like she's just keeping a closer ear on the people in her vicinity, and like just making sure they're not dickheads.
Having said that, though, she probably could do kind of ranged hearing as well.
I mean, she could, but even that is just like slightly less invasive in that, again, like you always choose when you speak, especially for practitioners. Like these are people who have said why words have weight, and Lucy's like, okay, well here I am, I'm fucking listening.
I'm listening to them. Yeah, exactly.
Like it to me, it has a very different vibe to like augurs and their eyesight imagery in a way that I find just much more like she's holding you to account. She's not 1984ing you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's words are things that you choose to say, right? Especially if you're a practitioner.
Yeah, and especially because she's only got the one earring as well. I'm jumping ahead here actually. But like she doesn't have the two. Like having two earrings, they talk about how it was a decision they didn't really end up making, but I think it was the right one. Maybe the spirits had their back, because if she had two earrings, that's kind of like all of her hearing. It's like diving both feet into the practice. But Lucy's never wanted to do that. Like she's using the practice to enhance herself, and so it's like just having the one. It's sort of like she's got that ear out, but she's also got that other ear that's just attached to the normal world. Like again, it's just, every aspect of this is just fucking perfect. I can't believe how good it is.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very good. Let's see what happens with them next chapter, I guess.
Yeah, let's dive in.
We get into cutting class 6.7. From Lucy's perspective, she is making the final preparations for her implement ritual.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, it's the whole chapter, and we'll dive so deeply into this, but there's something we didn't touch on with the Alcazar Ritual, but I want to touch on for both of them here, is ǀůʔ gives us short descriptions of, like, the symbols that, are going into these rituals. And it's just so fun. Like, I love how in the extra material at the start of the story, we had seeded these basic concepts of diagrams. And so now I feel comfortable just kind of like, as they're being described, kind of trying to interpret what they mean. Like the Alcazar one, it was, there was like a sun, a moon, and some stars in the Alcazar ritual, like which to me was like, oh, okay, like you're putting this shit in the cosmos. Like, when I think of those three things, like if it was just day and moon, I'd think, oh, there's some sort of like diurnal cycle thing happening. But when you put stars in there as well, to me, that's like those three symbolize the cosmos. And so like seeing stuff like that with that foundation of the diagram stuff we've already been given is just really cool.
Yeah, it allows us to dive into the diagrams in a way that we just wouldn't have been able to without like the bonus materials and stuff, for sure.
Yeah, like so this diagram, the implement one, like one of the drum beats Lucy keeps hitting as she's explaining it to us is that it's very symmetrical and everything's meeting on the middle. And I was kind of like, oh, what does that mean? And then the ritual starts, and you see that there's like the version of her as her implement on the other side. You're like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's literally setting up a mirror version of her, a reflection of herself, right?
Yeah,
a pale reflection, some might say.
It's explicitly not a pale reflection. It's like darker and smoky. Like it's
whatever, Elliot. All right. I just wanted to say the thing. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So good. Like, it's just so good, this whole ritual.
I love how, as well, like, it's just another little detail, like, the ritual said to dress comfortably, so, like, Lucy has done her best, but that's just so not her style that she's kind of semi-comfortable,
Yeah.
and she doesn't wanna borrow other people's clothes, which I think was the right call, but, yeah, like, I mean, I'm choosing to read this as, like, a positive thing, like, it's not her going against herself to dress comfortably here, it's, like, her becoming more comfortable with herself, and heading in that direction as she's getting this implement.
Mm. Yeah. I love that vibe. It's so Lucy. And then it plays again into like, I mean, yeah, it's an earring, right? No one would describe that as comfortable. She's kind of dressing up a bit. Like, again, it just works perfectly.
Earring I mean, I have no experience with earrings. Are they not comfortable?
I also don't wear them, but I mean, I can't imagine they are comfortable, right? Like they're things that go into your ear, and presumably, and from my experience with people in my life who do wear earrings, they kind of poke into the side of your face a fair amount when you're not just like standing around.
That
So
makes sense.
they're not. I don't think they're super comfortable. No.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I suppose speaking of things that in retrospect just seem obvious, but Walbo had to spell it out for us. Lucy has decided that her element is smoke. And again, like as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, there's at least like 4 examples I can think of her being smoke in this story.
Mm,
Yeah, it was right there, and like I love her description of it as it's like it's something that like rises above fire, and it could be abrasive, or in some situations it can be clean. Like it depends on how you treat it. Um,
mm.
yeah, like this chapter is just fucking full to the brim of shit that was just like, oh my god, of course.
Yeah. I mean, fully perfect stuff. It's great.
Like it's curious. It's got me curious. Like what elements would you say the other Kenneteers would have associated with them? I have my own ideas, but I'm curious what yours are.
I mean, the only lens I have that I feel like I'm analyzing this through is fucking what type of element bending would they do, right? I'm trying to that's kind of the only lens I have to analyze this through is where would they slot in an avatar? Um, and I think Verona's probably an airbender, realistically, because she's kind of like evasive and likes her bag of tricks and is all about the fun of it. Not spiritual, but more the kind of chill, fun vibes of being an airbender. And then Avery, I think, is probably like an earthbender. She's sporty, she's athletic, she's she packs a punch. Although she doesn't necessarily stand her ground that much, so maybe a waterbender is more appropriate for her.
Okay,
Is that what you're expecting me to say?
not at all. I mean, yeah. Well, okay. Well, I guess through that lens, what type of bending is Lucy?
I mean, I would have said firebending for Lucy.
Yeah.
Like she's got that kind of like proper vibe. She knows what she's about. She's there to get shit done, do what she's here to do.
But she doesn't mess around. Like I see firebending
Exactly.
is quite direct. Although earthbending,
Yeah.
she stands her ground.
True.
Maybe. So this is just turning into our pale avatar
Yeah,
crossover.
we're doing cross fiction. Yeah.
Um,
And then and now, what type of practitioner would Avatar Aang be? Let's try and answer that question. We've got the seed of a great crossfic here, Elliot. Let's monetize it.
No, I don't wanna.
Okay.
No, I think it's interesting because this sort of broadened my scope of what an element could be, because like smoke is not one of those 4.
No.
And in fact, like I think the awakening ritual at the start of the story had 5 elements associated with. Like you could have wood or metal, or was it 6, including those 2? Earth, air, fire, water, wood, and metal were the 6 that were brought up.
Yeah, I think so.
But then obviously, like, yeah, Lucy's just sort of like, no, my element is smoke, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's like more freeform than that. Like, it doesn't have
if
to
you
be.
can, it's more interpretive, as everything in Pale is.
Yeah, so like for Verona, I'd say her element has to be the dark, right? Like, there's a dark rune. I'm willing to call that an element.
Yeah.
Like in
Okay,
this
that
world.
is good.
And then for Avery, I just had air down, like because the air spirits that we've seen. Like she's got her
True,
Pegasus
she's got her
boots.
air boots. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and she does, she's always running around. She's got that kind of flighty. Yeah, I don't know. That's the
Yeah,
best
no,
I
I
could
can
come up
see
with.
it.
It's the one I'm the lowest confidence on. Verona for Dark, I was like, I'm pretty confident in this one, but
Mm.
Avery and Air, I'm sort of like, that's the best I can do.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, no, I think so.
Yeah. So,
Cool. All right. Well, stay tuned for our Avatar
yeah.
Pale cross fiction coming soon.
Well, you can,
Okay.
we'll both submit a thing for Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
But don't
Cool.
tell
Yeah.
Matthias and Jarvis.
Yeah. Don't
Just,
tell them.
just
No,
see how
it's a
confused
secret.
they get.
So Avery and Verona present Lucy with the earring, and it's cool. With the handover done, the two move into the corners of the room to stand guard, and Lucy begins the ritual proper.
I love how important all three of them are treating this. Like, they've got like a no talking rule in the room, which I don't think it's ever actually said is part of the ritual or not. I kind of like the idea that they've just decided it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And like Lucy even describes it as like kind of extra that they're presenting her earring to her in this fashion, but it's just like it's adorable and like good. Yeah, I just loved it.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's just a fun vibe of them kind of being there supporting Lucy, even though they're not really doing that much. They don't really seem to need to do much. It's not their ritual, you know.
Well, I mean, if they're going to stay in here for the majority of the 3 days, like they can't really talk or anything. Like,
Yeah, for 3 days.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
And presumably they're not like impacted by the thing that makes Lucy not have to go to the toilet or eat or whatever.
no, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I actually, just as a side note, I love this idea of that the implement ritual is like 3 days, and you can't like you sort of have to be shut off and kind of silent. Like it's got that real like kind of Eastern mythology, like find yourself type stuff that's kind of bastardized by yoga studios everywhere. So of course, like it's been sort of taken into the implement ritual.
Mm.
I suppose it's also got like monk vibes from like the Middle Ages as well. Like they'll
Yeah.
silent stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, like it's pretty crazy. Like the idea that I got the impression Lucy can't leave this diagram for 3 days, right? Like that's.
No.
I mean, that's
It's
a
a
tall
lot,
order.
isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Like
No,
she's got to
I
bucket
love
it.
this. Yeah. Oh God. Hopefully she doesn't have to use it. But I mean, I guess I'm reflecting on it. If a lot of it is like flashbacks and stuff, maybe it passes quicker than you'd expect.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I love this as a device because like ɁőɁ wasn't content to just give his protagonists 3 days off. So like I love how we've incorporated this into the story. It's like, okay, essentially the three of them kind of have to be locked in a place for 3 days. Well, let's have the world melt around them. Like I'm so
Yep.
in love with this idea that like maybe next chapter we're going to finish off this ritual, open the door again, and just be like, okay, fuck have we stepped into now?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. You just know that the Blue Heron Institute is going to shit outside those doors, right?
Yeah, but it's like, like a normal person in this world locks themselves up for 3 days, comes out as a new person with the implement having affected their diagram, and it's
Yep.
fine. But
Yep.
these three made the mistake of being ₦őő protagonists, so they're going to cut themselves
Always
off.
a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, they cut themselves off from the world for 3 days, and they're going to emerge into a brave new one.
Yup. We'll see. We'll see how different it's going to be. Should we talk about this weird moment? You pulled out this quote.
Oh,
Do you want to read it out?
Oh no, I don't want to read out the quote was there just so I could ask you. It's like this bit where Lucy's arm brushes up against the arm
The
of
implement's arm.
Yeah, the implement's arm, and then they like, do they pass through? Like, what happens here? I'm very confused.
I know. It took me a few reads to process it. I think the implement's arm is passing through hers, and it seems to like both cut through her arm and like cut through her flesh and nerves, veins, and muscle, etc. But also just kind of pass through it in a way that leaves it unharmed. It feels like it's doing both at the same time, which is strange, but I guess somehow works out in the Pale verse.
I suppose that makes sense for an earring, and there is a moment in amongst this text where it's like the earring went in, like it's
goes into her ear. Yeah,
yeah, the earring pierces your flesh, but you sort of come out better for it because you have an accessory slot on your body.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I just need like I sort of asked the same thing in my live read. I was like, I don't get this, but I'm buying that sort of. It's like a semi phasing through thing. Like it doesn't fully
Mm,
phase through, but it's like a rough
mm,
phasing through.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the earrings are brought to life, and Lucy relives the lesson with Bristow from earlier that day, except now with the power of the earring.
I mean, like it took me quite a while to work out what this was, like what we were doing here, and I
Yeah.
think that's by design,
Yeah.
because of the way it ends to sort of bridge that gap. Like it took me until this section ends to be like, oh, okay, that's what we were doing. Because as it was going, I was like, is this a flash forward or have we flashed back?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I was very confused about the timing of it because I was like, how did we flash forward to Friday? I thought they were waiting till the end of the week. Um, but like, yeah, I really like this as a really great way of showing us what this is going to do for Lucy because we and her get to relive this scene and sort of see what she would get out of having the earring in the scene.
It's a great way to demonstrate the power of it, isn't it? And then once you realize that this is in the past, you're kind of like, wait, how does the earring know that this is what happened in the past? Kind of similar to the question I raised, I guess, with the photo from last time, but this time the earring gives an explicit answer to that, which is a great,
Yeah.
wholesome moment later on that we'll
Yes,
get to.
we'll get there. That's great. But I mean, I just love everything. Like the first time we sort of see the earrings or the earrings additional information, like it's indented and italicized, and I was sort of like, oh, is this what the earring says? And then like immediately the next line is Lucy wished she could have heard what they said, and I was like, wait, so she didn't?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I love how I really love the sort of ride this took us on where we're sort of like you get the impression this is the earring telling us stuff, but she's not hearing it. So I was like, oh, what's
Yeah.
happening? And that fits so well into the lesson that the earring gives her at the end that you just brought up. So let's get there.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there. In a little bit.
Yeah, but obviously, so the thing we actually cut back to, as you sort of said, is Bristow, who's kind of interrupting his own lesson on binding humans because that's something you should teach at school.
Yup.
He kind of he interrupts himself talking about that to just like go on about how Alexander like stole the school from him and like all of this was my idea, like trying to bullshit claim the school. And then he sort of goes on about how like, oh, you can't just get world peace by making everyone play nice. You've got to like, basically have mutually assured destruction. Which is just like, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's this sort of thinking. Like these are the assholes who are like we talked about this before. It's like it's better if you can just go around and improve everyone, but sometimes you got to run into these fuckwits who are like, no, the only way to do it is with fear. And it's just like yeah, just because one tactic doesn't work on everyone, like it doesn't mean you pick the shittier tactic that does.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I know that the Kennedys are trying to stay neutral here, but it's really not. Not once have I ever seen an interaction with Bristow and thought, you know what, he might be all right. Like legitimately, I'm just 100% on Team Alexander. I know Alexander has his own problems, but at least he's like pretends to be decent sometimes. Jesus.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see Bristow's interactions with people who are on his side. Although again, yeah, or someone he was trying to court, I suppose, because that's like to me,
But what
I
you're
put
asking is for Bristow to try and be manipulative so that you
yeah,
can like him. But that's crazy, right?
but that's what Alexander's doing. Like you've got to
Yeah,
use
but
that
if
lens
you
for
nah,
Alexander.
okay. Elliot, have you ever heard of the expression fake it till you make it? Okay. Alexander pretends to be nice as an effort to manipulate people. But if he does it 24/7, there's
It
no
just
difference
become
between him and a
nice.
nice person. So that's where I'm at,
No, I get that. Like, if even if your motivations start out as shitty, but you're doing the right thing, like that's better than the other way around.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure that the spirits are forcing Alexander to be a good principal. And based on that, like I don't care why he's being nice. If he's just a nice guy and there's no problem with him being in charge of the school, then fuck it. I'm okay with it.
I feel like you need to reread Nicolette's interlude 2.x.
No, I don't want to do that though. That's gonna challenge my worldviews and I don't need that.
Uns- uh, you tell Facebook, don't show me stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to live in my echo chamber where Alexander's the good guy.
Yeah, like I don't know, because Alexander is kind of the same as Bristow in this one way of like, this idea of they're like, oh, we sort of want world peace. It's just we kind of have to be on top of it.
Mm.
And yeah, like Bristow's whole thing here of like, oh, if we can't make everyone play nice, we have to excise the depraved people and just get rid of them. There's no concept of trying to help people here, which is where his
Mm.
ideology falls apart for me. Like, I
Mm.
know we can't make everyone play nice, but like, if you're not trying to, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why should I care?
Yeah,
If you're not
exactly.
even trying to be good, what motivation do I have to care about what you're doing and potentially side with you?
Yeah, exactly.
Genuinely, the best Bristow can ask for is neutrality, and it's not. I don't know, like.
Well, let's get there because maybe we're jumping ahead a bit into the conversation he has with Lucy soon.
Sure. So yeah, this lesson that we are reliving is combat-based bindings. So we're gonna have bindings. The groups are gonna line up and then duel each other, kind of up the line, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like right from the get go, as a reader, I was on board with this because I was like,
Oh yeah,
oh
as a reader, you're
yeah,
all for it, aren't you?
yeah, I was just like, oh fuck yes, we're doing like magician duels in a safe
Yeah.
zone. Like, sign me the fuck up.
Yep.
This is great.
I'm so for it. I do think it's a great example of how devious Bristow can be, though, because this is like
Oh yeah,
legitimately quite a devious class. He's basically getting his students, his aligned students, I should say, who obviously kind of seem to be good at binding, to have precedent where they have bound their fellow classmates, which is so cheeky. Can't help but respect how cheeky of a play it is. It's a great way to set up some like precedent for their victories potentially coming up later on.
yeah, and like to not to support your team, Alexander is the good guy,
Yeah,
crusade, but the fact that all of the people on Bristow's side are the top human binders, like
yeah, creepy.
yeah, okay, yeah, like especially like this class opens with Henniger, so of course this is like
Mm.
the daddy Henniger coming into the fore, which we've been constantly getting reminded this arc, like this is our violence family.
Yes, they're
And
not good role models for our Kenneteers at the very least.
yeah, so you've got someone who's like associated with violence teaching this class, and
Hmm.
he opens it with like line yourselves up in order of your own confidence, which I was like, okay, well, that's just a
Great.
metric designed to make people fight.
Yep. Clearly just fucking with them off the bat, which is fine.
And like the Teds, the goblin princesses, it
The
immediately fall
tits.
for it with Lucy.
Yes,
Um,
works a treat on them 100%.
yeah, like that just sets the tone for what this lesson is. That Henniger opens it with line yourselves up in order of confidence.
Yeah. In order of who's my favorite student, align yourself that way. Which is basically how it ends up going.
Yeah. And like the question that I was raising at this point is like, what is Alexander doing? Because we see Bristow sort of say, such a one-sided lesson. What a shame for Alexander. And I was like, that's a very good point. Like Alexander
Yeah, is
better be
Alexander
doing something
indisposed
else.
somewhere? Yeah. Has
Um,
Alexander's car broken down now and it's just a back and forth of that over and over again?
because like Bristow, is very blatantly one-sided in how he manages this lesson.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and like we start from the bottom, so like we kind of open with the kids who aren't good at this, who have the risk of taking it too far and stuff, and
Hmm.
all the ones who are aligned with Alexander, like starting infighting. And,
Yep.
and I mean it works. By the end of the lesson, we see that the legendaries have swapped sides, or at
Yep.
least joined a side.
Yep. So seems like it's going according to plan, which is well bad because I'm on Team Alexander. Yeah, it's a upsetting lesson as well. Like teaching your students how to bind each other, which is already a disgusting word to use in response to another human being, right? Like it's just a bad look.
I suppose, to be fair, like they teach binding of others,
Mm.
so at least there's
At least there's
there
parody.
Well,
Yeah.
they're equal opportunity fuckwits, right? Because they're
Yeah.
they do it to people too.
Great. That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Thanks,
See,
Elliot.
if you lower the bar unilaterally, that's okay.
Yeah. As long as you're a real piece of shit to everybody, then it's fine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we basically get these little bits of combat with people fighting each other. I guess we can focus mainly on the ones that involve our trio, right? We've got Verona versus Erasmus, and Verona wins by doing her shadow clone cat ninjutsu.
Yeah. Oh, and
We then
this is, I think, maybe a little bit of a delivery on why Erasmus was in a couple of chapters ago. Like, because I'm just starting to remember, Wobbo's treating it like you don't have to read the extra materials. So
yes,
without that previous appearance, without those previous mentions of the Henniggers, like somebody who isn't reading the extra material would have no idea who these people are.
Who they are. Yeah, exactly. But we do. So good work, Wabo, seeding that from earlier. Then we have Avery versus Verona. Verona throws out some names like Pam and Mrs. Hardy, which is a real dick move. So Avery grabs her in response and wins that encounter.
It's such a peaceful resolution, though. It's so Avery that she wins by just physically closing her mouth, like with her hand.
It's good. It's perfect.
Well, this is also
snap that big shut.
Yeah, this moment with Verona, to me, this was, like I've talked to, and Nicolette has talked about like how Verona and Alexander have their little similarities. And this felt like a very Alexander moment to me from Verona, just like taking it a bit far, because she's more obsessed with the game and maybe losing focus a bit.
Yeah. True. I think it is a bit of, this is another thing, is by having the Kenneteers battling against each other, maybe this wasn't Bristow's intention, but it ends up this way. With the Kenneteers battling against each other, Bristow theoretically has a bunch of ins that he gets against them, right? A bunch of vulnerabilities, their names or what they would do to bind each other, which is exactly what he would want if he's going to need to bind them in the end, which we suspect might happen.
Yeah, Avery and Verona have had a bit of tension between them these last few chapters with all the Jeremy stuff and then the bit of teasing Verona did back last chapter. So yeah, maybe people are trying to open up a divide there, but I can't help but feel that the Kenneteers will just close it through their powers of communication.
Powers of friendship. Yes, hopefully. We will see, I suppose. So yes, then we get Avery versus Liberty Ted. A great use of goblins in this fight, but Avery ends up winning through judicious use of her hockey stick.
We didn't call out how she used her hockey stick in the Alcazar. I thought that was hilarious that there were all these crazy spiritual omens in the Alcazar, and Avery just starts beating them down with her hockey stick.
Just beating the shit out of them. Classic. Strong move. Avery's great. The hockey stick stuff is always top, right?
Yeah, it is. I love seeing her just use it as a whacking stick. But Snowdrop gets injured in this battle, which I found very upsetting.
Yes, I am not equipped to handle Snowdrop injuries, I don't think.
It immediately gets undone. So I could breathe, but
Avery taps out of the next fight to instead kind of take care of Snowdrop, which is very good of her.
It can't be a coincidence that it was goblins that did this, right?
Yeah, true. I like that thought. I hadn't thought of it, but I do like it. So then we get Avery tapping out, and then Lucy versus America Ted is where things go next. And Lucy ends up winning this one through kind of Fey duelist shenanigans, right?
Yeah. We're really not doing any of these fights justice because it's hard to do in this format, but they're all so cool.
They are all great.
This one is a standout. Lucy boomerang hat smoke out for herself. And then gets her swords and starts throwing swords at America. This is stuff. We need a visual adaptation of Pale just for this scene.
Well, these battles are so much fun. Just seeing all the tricks, the ninjutsu that they're pulling out to fight each other. I've used that word a few times because it reminds me of the only good part of Naruto, which is where the kids all fight each other in a big arena. It's just so fun, I'm so there for that vibe.
Yeah. I haven't seen Naruto. The only comparison I sort of made was I think it's in one of the first Harry Potters. There is a bit where they start a dueling club. And
It's in the second one, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Just having kids fight each other and pulling out magic tricks is just a bunch of fun, you know? I
yeah,
mean, that sounds gross, but hey, it's true.
it's fun to watch if it's fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you like, yeah, it's just so fun. Like all the various tricks they pull out, like seeing what goblin princesses are like in action, which is like, one of them summons an army of little goblins,
Yep.
and then the other one starts like projectile vomiting, aggressively, which I suppose that's a
Classic.
strategy.
Yep, why not? You
Um,
use what you have, you use the tricks at your disposal.
like seeing what all these flavors of practitioner look like in action is just very
Mm,
fun.
yeah, for sure.
And seeing as well, like I think it's Georgia, like in the first one, who calls in her drugstore cowgirl, and that's like really
Mm,
expensive for her too. Like we
yes.
use this as another opportunity to highlight how much free power the Kenneteers have, because like Bristow brings up, Lucy could just summon up some of those duelist arenas as many times as she wants, really. Whereas
Yeah.
we get the impression it really cost Georgia to bring in the drugstore cowgirl like that.
Yeah, and I think another great reason why this is such a good move by Bristow, because he's getting like the people who are going to kind of expend the most are the people who are at the bottom of the list trying to prove themselves, who's incidentally also the people who aren't really on Bristow's team. So get them to spend all their tricks right before the weekend where everything's going haywire, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, and he's just starting infights. Like, that first one between Georgia and the youngest Grobard girl. Like,
Yeah.
their friendship was going to come out of that a little damaged. Was the impression I got.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I got the same impression.
which is exactly what he's after. I mean,
Of course.
like to come back to Verona a bit. Like, so Verona has that bit where she probably took it a bit far against Avery with like a bit of a dick move.
Yeah.
And I love how this ties in. Like Bristow's comment after Avery trounces Verona is
Yeah.
Bristow's like, you need to work on your defense more than your offense. And I
Yeah.
couldn't help but notice the real defense that she should be implementing right now is not falling for Bristow's bullshit and hurting Avery. So he's exactly right, but not for the reasons he's saying it. Unless, knowing
Yeah,
Bristow,
it's
maybe he
really.
is.
I
Yeah,
mean, they really go hard on each other, especially this bit where Verona throws out Pam and Mrs. Hardy's
yeah,
names is strong. Like
yeah. Like,
that's a strong betrayal.
yeah, she needs to be defending herself against falling for exactly what Bristow wants her to do, which is
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
waste power on shit like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a. I don't know. We haven't seen Bristow being that much of a like snake before, but man, this stuff is snaky.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he balances his apartment complex, right? Like, I imagine this is the sort
Yeah,
of snaky shit he does as a part of that.
yeah. I guess he's kind of
He knows what two
he's
people to put next
yeah,
to each other.
he's used to getting people to push buttons and socially manipulating, I suppose.
Yeah, but like he indirectly socially manipulates. He sets up people to do it for him. Like,
Yeah,
the reason this is only like the second big conversation we have with him coming up is because usually he sends Ted's or Clem's or Daniel's to do his dirty work.
to do his dark bidding for him. Exactly right.
Um, so before we move on from the duels, I just want to pull out this one quote from Lucy, which is where
Mm.
Bristow orders her to withdraw her effect, and then he can at least heal America. And Lucy
Hmm.
responds, "And me, I'm not too badly hurt." And this is like the first time America actually starts suffering. Like she's like been enjoying feeling barbed wire on her spine.
God, yeah. What is up with her? She's the fucking weirdest.
Um,
Creepy.
I mean, yeah, but I could see that. Like, that just reeks of goblin to me. Like, I guess this is just
Mm.
like goblin practitioners align themselves with goblins for a reason. Because I could totally see like Gashwad or Butt Munch being like that.
Yeah, basically having these exact interactions for sure.
But I just love that badass moment from Lucy where she's just like, "Oh yeah, I'm not badly hurt." I think this is the moment where Bristow like actually takes her away. It's just like,
Yeah.
fuck, like Lucy's such a badass in this fight.
Yep. Great stuff, Lucy. Excellent work. Yeah, so Lucy and Bristow go off on a walk and talk to basically chit chat about neutrality.
Yeah, and I mean Lucy again just kicks ass and is a badass for this whole conversation. Like she absolutely doesn't take any shit from Bristow, and it was giving me life.
Yep. She's great, isn't she?
I went to pull out all of her best lines from this to read out, but there ended up being so many. I've cut myself down to
It's
just
all
one.
best lines. Okay.
So I just wanted to really pull out this one where Bristow asks her, "What do you think neutral is?" When she sort of says it's not being in the middle. And she says it's not. Or she says, "I think it's not explicitly taking a side. I think it's holding on to what we believe. I think it's fighting people like Shelley, who hurt Jessica as bad as she did, and not encouraging them." And I mean, like, this is just perfect. Like, that is such a perfect summary of a good position to take. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
You don't.
You're not saying that you're not going to take any action. That's not what you're doing. What you're saying is you're not going to take any shit.
Yeah.
It's different, you know?
You're not just going to mindlessly sign yourself up to a political party or otherwise and vote for them regardless of what they do. You're going to hold people accountable to what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I just love this as a stance.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm with you there. Yeah, it's a good one. So I love we get during this bit the revelation that the fact that this implement ritual has happened here is kind of all part of a deal with Bristow, and I think that's pretty wild. Like, the trio actually have kind of allowed Bristow to pull his shenanigans here, which is more than I expected them to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is an argument that like taking themselves out of it like this for these 3 days is kind of going against what Lucy just said about being neutral, because they're kind of allowing both Bristow and Alexander to do whatever their bullshit is.
Yeah, which I don't like. I mean, it's fine, I guess, but it worries me that, I don't know. It worries me that they are just kind of letting stuff happen at letting Bristow and Alexander do whatever they want for 3 days, basically, right?
Yeah.
And not to mention the fact that I've grown attached to Alexander and they are kind of betraying him here.
Yeah, see, I don't give a shit about that part. Like
shame on you.
There's totally part of me that is like, you know that meme from Godzilla. It's like, let them fight. Like,
yeah,
let them weaken each other, and then the three Kenneteers can swoop in and become the new headmaster.
Become the new, yeah, exactly. Great. What a perfect happy ending to this story that would be.
Look, like, my prediction here is there's absolutely no way this conflict will be over by the Monday morning. They're going to step out into a war in progress is my guess.
Yeah. I mean,
to get back to your point, like, I agree. Like, there's something that just feels a bit, well, yeah, it goes against that perfect thing Lucy made, where it's just like hiding out for 3 days and saying, okay, you two evil people can have 3 days of doing your own
free
shit.
reign to, exactly.
Like, that's not great. But then at the same time, they're going to come out of it more powerful, and there's kind of nothing they can do to stop them. So
yeah,
I
don't know. I mean, yes, kind of, but still, that feels kind of dodge, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Like, I don't know. I'm hesitant to lay too much judgment down until we see how things end up. Although that's not really the point, right? We shouldn't judge actions based on the consequences. We should judge them based on what they look like when you made the decision.
Yeah, and the intentions of what these, groups are trying to do, which clearly is not super positive, seemingly.
Yeah. Like, I suppose the thing that comes down to for me is like, does letting this war happen without them in it seem like a worse thing to do? And I feel like the answer is yes.
I agree, which is, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see. I suppose.
Let's see how it does turn out, I suppose.
Yeah. So of course the great question is asked here of, hey, Bristow, do you see yourself as a good person? And of course he can't say yes to that because he's a piece of shit. So he gives a real weasel of an answer, which is, well, I don't, I'm just a man, blah, blah, blah. And the only people who don't think that morality exists for people are people who have already kind of failed the morality test, right? Like, nobody who's genuinely a good person says, I don't think good and bad people exist. That's only something that pieces of shit would say. So I like Bristow is really, he's just not doing anything to reassure us that he's not a piece of shit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to that thing where it's like, if you're not trying to make the world a better place, then, like, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, what are you doing with yourself?
Like, at least if you're gonna, like, have shit values of what is making the world a better place, at least you're trying, right? Like, that's a whole separate set of issues.
Some value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some values, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm very. The more we see Bristow, the more I'm reassured that I am correct to be anti-Team Bristow. Basically, he's
I
just a
do
piece of
feel
shit.
like Team Alexander will win. Like, if you ask me to pick which side will win, I think it will be
You think?
Alexander.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um,
Um,
so you're on the right team at least, probably.
yeah, I think it's unlikely that Bristow's going to win this conflict, just because I don't want him to. I guess is where I'm at. So yeah, we jump back to the ritual, and the Lucy's new implement, the earring, kind of continues to tell Lucy all of the secrets that she could and should have known in the past few days. And man, this is great, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What a wholesome implement this is.
I mean,
It's
yeah,
so nice.
it's so good. I think, yeah, it's just a beautiful moment with a beautiful message.
Yeah. The earring basically, weirdly, I don't know why, maybe it's because it's got a creepy, weird hand, but I was expecting it to be like maybe kind of orange blue morality or just a bit creepy. And it is, I
So,
guess, a bit, but
what's orange blue morality?
as in the idea that it basically doesn't ascribe to kind of human morality systems and stuff, that it's like
Okay,
more other, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
okay.
But it's really wholesome. Like, it basically delivers her this positive message of like, no, Lucy, you're great, you're smart, you're awesome, you should trust your gut more because you knew all this stuff. I'm just here to reflect the awesomeness of yourself back at you. And I'm like, oh, implement, you're so nice.
Yeah, well, it's like because it opens things up with like, "I'm here to challenge you," which set a bit more of an ominous tone for me, and then its way of challenging
Yes.
her is mostly just, "Hey, you're actually more awesome than you think," and I'm like, "Okay, well, I
Yeah.
mean, I
Good challenge. Yeah,
yeah,
no, you're right.
I
Yeah.
could do with some challenges like that."
Yeah. It's great.
Um,
What a wholesome implement.
well, and I love this because like Lucy's whole thing, like, and we talked about this when we were trying to guess what her implement would be, was she was constantly talking about like, oh, I want to enhance myself. Like, I want the practice to elevate me, not
Mm,
like to attune myself to the practice.
mm.
So it's so perfect that her implement sits her down and is basically like, hey, so I'm going to let you eavesdrop on stuff or whatever, but like most of it you already knew. Like, basically her earrings lesson for this chapter is it's telling her, I'm going to let you hear these words, but you kind of knew what I can tell you anyway. You If you
Yeah.
trust your gut, you're already there. And that's so perfect to that. Like, this is an item that is based on her and based on her relationship with her friends. So of course its message is just, you're actually more awesome than you give yourself
You're the
credit for.
best. Yeah,
Um
you've surrounded yourself with awesome people. Let yourself have an awesome life.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, like just the idea that an implement to enhance herself took the form of just, hey, I'm going to help you, but you also don't need me as much as you think, is just perfect.
Mm, mm. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Lucy starts to attune her eavesdropping power, turning to the question of love over the conflict outside.
Yes, and when she chooses the question of love, our good old friend Class Ranker finally rears its ugly head again.
Yes, welcome back, class
Um,
ranker.
which is just the perfect sort of final test because it's like do you really want all this information? Like, what's the most hurtful part of information, or what's the most harmful part of information she could get? Well, it's reconfronting the time she got 0 in Class Ranker.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Ouch. But yeah, I mean, it's still moderately nice, moderately wholesome. We get a bit of confirmation that Lucy and Wallace could be a pretty good couple. Wallace is keen on her.
Well, and she explicitly says she's keen back.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah, I
True.
mean, I guess I look forward to that continuing when she gets home. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, that's this manages to stay negative only for about like 20 lines, and then it immediately goes back to like Wallace. Like, it's sort of like
Yep.
she listens to all those sort of comments, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them are kind of negative, and then it just immediately spins into the positive. And I love that as a message. It's like, even this worst thing, she only had to push through the pain for a couple of lines.
Mm. Yeah. Great stuff. Uh, and then, of course, the chapter ends with us getting hints that something really bad is happening outside. Uh, Lucy uses the word siege to describe what's going on out there, maybe as a just kind of catch-all term. But yeah, that's rough. We'll see.
I mean, yeah, I can't wait. Like, I think I've spent most of this arc saying, yeah, any second it's going to pop off. But like
Yep,
this
here it
chapter
is.
explicitly sort of ends on it's begun. And
Yep.
it feels like 6.8 is going to be us walking into that.
Yeah, walking into a battle halfway in progress, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I can't wait. Especially because I could almost see it being another Lucy chapter. Just from a, like I don't know. I do kind of feel like this is shaping up to be a bit of a Lucy arc. I mean, it's not as simple as like this is the Lucy arc and the other two don't matter. But like Lucy has sort of come to the fore thematically as we're talking about this neutrality stuff, and I kind of want to see her with her new implement step out and judge, be the judge on everyone.
Yes, judge how people are, what war crimes are being committed.
Yeah. I would especially, this kind of gets me excited as well for if I'm a little bit right that Arc 5 focused a little bit more on Verona and this one's felt like it's focused a little bit more on Lucy. Does that mean next arc we're going to get some really interesting Avery stuff? Suppose we'll see.
We shall see, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that's that because there's no extra material this week.
Yeah,
which I mean, yeah,
spring
these
break
last 3 have been so long. I was like,
yeah.
I like to be perfectly honest. I was kind of like, oh yeah, a little break. We don't have to. We get to write a few less notes.
Yeah. But of course, we have to fill the break with something, and so we are. Visiting the answers to our discussion question from last week, which was, which of the big 3 rituals do you find the most interesting or exciting, and why?
Yes. So what's the first answer you've pulled out, Ruben?
Yes. So the first answer was from Landis963, who talks about how they would probably want to get a domain, but they just know that it would tend towards bad habits, in the sense of they would basically just end up wanting to spend all their time inside their own domain, which I think has been called out in the text as a concern if you have a domain, like to make sure you don't fall into that. And I know I would do the exact same thing. Like, imagine a region where you basically turn into a god. It would just be so fun being in there fucking playing The Sims with your own house. So you'd really have to be careful that you don't just do that, I guess.
Well, I think the interesting part of that is to do all this stuff in your domain. Something that came up in that text was you do need something to power it. Like, it can be a bit of a battery, but you need to be getting power to put into that battery to charge it. So if you become a bit of a shut-in, I think the problem stems from the fact that you aren't bringing power into it. I don't know. But I mean, I agree. As somebody who did not have to change their lifestyle that much this year, because I am a bit of a house hermit, I could see that being a big problem.
Yes. We got a few other answers talking about other rituals, but a kind of common thread we got from the others was people talking about how they would personally interact with the rituals, which ended up leading to most people talking about the same kind of thing, which is, well, if I'm thinking about what ritual I would do, it's the implement ritual, because I don't want to lock myself down too permanently. A meeting an other that I want to get married to is crazy and would take a long time. So people all just kind of vibed with the implement ritual, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense because it is the most individual one. Like, you're picking something just to have on your person. It's the one that ties you down the least, as you said. But as we sort of talked about in the implement text, and as we discovered when we chose our implements many, many moons ago, it is just an intensely personal experience that like it is very hard. Like Lucy and Ray talked about this. That doesn't make it simple.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I think a lot of people have thought about what their implement would be, though, right? Like, we got a response from Napalm Eagle, who's basically like, hey, I've been thinking about this since we did the implement question for Deep Impact, so I'm ready to do my implement ritual, basically.
That's good to hear. Like, especially because, like, I'm still holding on to the same implement I've had since we did that discussion question for Deep Impact, and I'm still not convinced that I'd commit to it. So good on Napalm Eagle for having that self-confidence.
Exactly. I mean, it's basically, do you know yourself well enough to make that commitment? I guess is the question that we're really asking, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
We got answers from Uncle Thermoscales, who again said would want to do all 3, but the implement is probably the one. Similarly, Propaganda Pagoda implement is the easiest to do, and it would be the easiest to find a suitable candidate. So get into it,
Yeah. Although I think Propaganda Pagoda also said that they think the familiar ritual is like the coolest.
Yes, they gave us a little tier list. So the familiar
Yeah.
ritual was at S tier, because I mean having an autonomous kind of sentient ally is of course very powerful, right? Putting aside
Yeah.
all the kind of like power stuff. An implement is just a reflection of yourself, and so you're kind of leading into an echo chamber a bit there, whereas a familiar can bring some interesting new ideas to you, basically, I suppose.
Well, I mean, conceptually, hopefully, it represents someone who will always be on your side. And
Mm,
I mean, as Avery will tell you, that's a very enticing idea.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a good idea. Getting a strong ally, it's can't be overstated.
Yeah.
All right. So that's thanks to those of you who left answers to our discussion question. It's much appreciated. If you want to discuss this episode or the show in general, you can find links to our discussion thread in the show notes down below.
Yes, we're also on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this. Please chuck us a review. That tells those services that, hey, people like this
That
enough to
we're
leave a
good.
review.
Yeah,
I
that
should
people
show it
like
to
us.
others.
Yeah.
And that's, and then, if you're growing pale through growing us, then that's a win-win.
Yes, indeed it is. Yeah, review us. Why not check out our Twitter while you're at it? You can go to @MediaMT Podcast, where we do all kinds of cool tweets, all kinds of latest hot memes. Right?
Yeah, there was actually a few memes in my latest live reads.
Nice.
There are packed
Good on
spoilers
you,
in
Elliot.
those.
You made me not gainsaid.
So do only come if you can cope with packed spoilers.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's also doofmedia.com. That's the place to go for all the other shows on the Doof Network. It's also like the website that will have the details on the fan art contest that we just announced at the start of the
Yes.
episode. So
Yep.
go there, check it out, see what other shows you might be interested in.
Yeah. If you appreciate the fact that we do things like fan art contests, the only reason we can do that is because of our patrons. A portion of our Patreon revenue every month gets put aside to be winnings for fan art contests and things like that. So if you want to help make sure that those things happen in the future, head to patreon.com/doofmedia and become one of our patrons.
Yes, they've also just started a Doof the Right Thing quarterly like fan fiction. Well, it's not fan fiction.
Yes.
But it can be.
Cross fiction, explicitly. I think it has to be between Avatar and Pale, I think. Is that right?
No, you're meant to edit a story you've already submitted.
Yes.
And, again, there's prize money for that. Wouldn't be possible without our patrons. So check out Do
I
the
think
Right
the details for that are on the Do the Right Thing subreddit and the doofmedia.com site as well.
Yeah. So check that out. If you're NaNoWriMoing or whatever this month, give it a look.
Yep. Yeah. While you're on Patreon, why not head on over to Wildbow's Patreon? You can do an Alcazar of your wallet, go inside, find a coin, and leave it for him. I'm sure he would much appreciate it, because, of course, he creates all these stories that we shamelessly dive into each week for our own content.
Yep. And so with that note, can I spring on you a Back to Pact, Ruben? I just decided I want to do
sprung. All right. It's not in our notes, so no. I'm being equally sprung as you are right now, audience members. So I guess if you don't want packed spoilers, get the heck out of here. Otherwise, let's dive into it. What do you got for me, Elliot?
Next week. Well, okay, so this was our first ever implement ritual that we've seen in practice.
Yes, I was thinking about this as well. It's so cool. I mean, we haven't got a domain ritual before, but we saw Mags do her version of the domain ritual, right?
We saw a good chunk of not Johannes's, Jeremy's domain ritual actually. Like we saw some of the fights he had in his
Right, you're right. Yes, we did. True. Yeah, I guess you're right. Although I feel like we didn't. I don't know. Maybe that is the major part of the domain ritual. I feel like we didn't get much of the ritual bit, whereas for this, we actually quite focused on, for the implement stuff, we focused quite on the ritual parts. Yeah. I guess for the familiar ritual, it was a bit kind of defined as well. It was a bit amorphous when Blake and Evan did it. It was kind of low budget familiar ritual, I guess.
Yeah, it was. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, there's probably a version of the implement ritual that's less precise, but, the Kenneteers had access to the spray chalk.
To all these resources, yeah.
I mean, what jumped out to me? Do you remember that time Blake was considering making the hyena his implement? And so, okay, first of all, as if it's not bad enough, Blake would have to sit in a spot for 3 days. Good fucking luck.
Oh yeah, there's no way he was ever going to do that. For sure.
Even if he does.
Then he has to interact with the hyena for 3 days. Like, yeah, for sure. There's no way that was going to happen. You're right.
No, like
I'm actually surprised how sentient the implement seems in this ritual, you know?
I wonder how normal that is.
Yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it? Is it just a difference in resources available? Is it a difference in, ዄđ's thoughts about how these things should operate in the, 5 or 6 years between?
Well, I mean, the cool thing about that is, like, any slight changes in the way these things work can actually be chalked up to just, like, we've moved to a different part of the world. Like, because these things are so interpretive. Like, we saw it with the Awakening Ritual, right? Like, the Awakening Ritual is a perfect example of how fluid these rituals are. So what I love about this world is even if ŨAÂ wants to do something different with it in a future story, he's free to tweak things a bit and just chalk it up to, this is how they do it over here now.
Yeah, true. Yeah, he's left himself the space to do that, which is great. I really loved seeing this. I loved seeing the implement ritual. It's so cool to have seen it. It's awesome.
Yeah, like not
to mention the Alcazar stuff again. Very cool.
The Alcazar stuff for me feels like as close as we might get to this story to the possession mechanic from Pact, which is like when we finished Pact, I think the thing I was like, I wish we could have seen more of that the most was the time Blake was possessing Rose. Like that was something I was like, you could have written whole stories just around the possession mechanic and I'd read them.
Yeah, I guess you're right that we kind of had what does the inside of Rose's head look like from Blake's perspective. And that's kind of what the Alcazar stuff has been touching on, I guess. A kind of physical space as a representation of a metaphysical concept.
It's similar-ish. I'm just so desperate for more of that mechanic that I'm willing to twist something like the Alcazar into, hey, this kind of counts. I mean, I'm curious, to go back to like the implement ritual, like what Alistair's deck of cards might have been like and how it would have challenged him, like it's so fun to go back to old practitioners who had implements and think about like, what did Maggie have to go through with her Athame?
Like, because it's so much more involved than I guess I would have assumed it was. Like, you're not just picking an item and doing some magic words and then suddenly that item has additional power for you. You're like actually bringing it into yourself and having it challenge you, right? That's the right way to frame it. Like, it just adds such an extra level of depth that I guess I just wasn't expecting.
Yeah, like would Alistair's implement have challenged him on how cocky he was? Like, because it would have had to do the opposite of Lucy, right? It would have had to be like, bro, calm down. You're the worst.
Or would it have like refined his, been like, hey, like these are the things that you're actually really good at. You actually are good at like predicting people, and so here's how we can tap into that kind of vibe.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I don't know. Would have been awesome, I'm sure.
Yeah, fun to think about. Anyway, so just a quick back to Pact, but I just had this thought.
A quick trip back. Yeah, cool. Thanks for doing it. All right. I guess that's the end of the episode.